Hey guys, this is Eric Weingartner with Weingartner Racing. Today's video is about the intake manifolds, which are all these here, that are going to be used on the dyno mule for round 2. So you're going to get to see what's changed with each one of these manifolds, so you can see what's going on, and maybe you can make some predictions, and I'll give you a little bit of mine on what will happen or may not happen with any of these. So that's what today's video is about. Before I get into that, if you'll notice, in this whole stack, you're looking, you're like, I don't see a Victor Jr. or a Team G. That's probably the two most they got asked the most. I don't have one. If you have a stock, which means it cannot been molested, and it's in usable condition, Victor Jr., and you can get it to my shop by Wednesday, I will put it on the dyno, or a Team G. So, there you go. If you want to see it, you'd have to get it here before that date. I didn't think I was going to test them, but so many people have asked. I would, but I don't have one. So you have till Wednesday to get it here. But anyway, I'm going to break down each one of these and talk about when I'm on this test with it. And you'll get to see there's a couple of new players in this mix and that haven't been on the dyno mule before. So you get to see that. If you're curious, you're like, what is this video? What are you talking about the dyno mule? Well, you can go back and watch my previous videos, and you can watch me talk about my dyno mule. And this is a book that has all the data from the very first test. There were 44 pulls done there, not all 44 dyno sheets on there, but all the ones used to compare. This book runs $38 shipped to you. You can find that link to my store on my website, wengines.com. And anyway, ship those out. There will be another book made for all the data for this when it finally gets done too, which will be very interesting. So anyway, let me get started talking about what's changed on each one of these manifolds. Here are the first two manifolds I want to talk about. This one is an AFR 4811, but so is this one. Now, this one was used on dyno mule in the first session. When it was on there before, it was completely stock. So what I changed from that before was the 4811 has like a clover leaf that's built in. All I did was remove it. It's all gone. And I just smoothed it out. I didn't make it like, I didn't really port it, just smoothed it out. And as you can tell, all the runners and everything else are pretty much the same. Like I said, just cut out the clover leaf, blended it. That's it. No port match, anything else, nothing else has been done. This one is that same manifold with an exception. This is actually version 2. So let me show you what I mean. If you type up there, it goes version 2. Even though they're same part number, 4811. Look how that one's 4811. This is version 3. In theory, they're the same manifold, which they are. The difference is this one was for a customer, so he'd ordered a fully ported one. And you might say, man, you made that way too polished. Yeah, it's actually for an EFI deal. So what's going to happen on this, on the dyno mule, all I'm going to do is switch from this to right to this. And the difference between the two is this one's completely ported. And it's actually matched, which I still got to wipe off the dicom, but that's matched to a AFR 220 port. So it's not going to fit the AFR enforcers that are on there now, obviously, but neither did that. But this one, as you can tell, it's, I mean, you have stock ported. It's much larger. And like I said, the reason why it looks so shiny on the bottom there is because, and usually I don't even do that, is because he's doing EFI. So after the dyno mule stuff, I clean it up and he's going to send it off to have fuel injection bungs put in. So it doesn't have to be, you know, usually I put a burr finish on the floor. No need for this. So we'll get tests on this. Did the clover leaf do anything? And then what's a fully ported one do versus the clover leaf being removed? So that'd be interesting. But that's those two. Let's go on to the other ones. Here are the next two manifolds. Both of these were run on the previous dyno session. So what this is the Edelbrock Reformer RPM. Now what's happened that's changed from before is the Reformer RPM has a bar, or a divider that goes all the way across. I've obviously milled it out, and I've not all the way, because it's still got about a ½ inch here. And then I blended it, and that's it. That's the only thing that's been changed. We'll see if actually cutting out the divider, and I did take a good cut. I mean, if you look compared to the AFR, I mean, I took a good cut out. That's how that one's gonna get tested, and we'll see if cutting out the divider did anything. Now on the AFR, this is their 4812. If you watched my other videos about it, you would have heard me talk about how it didn't do as good as that one, obviously, but the problem was, it might have been the spacer. I'd been using this spacer, which has a cone that sticks out above the deck, and it fit on this, but it might have blocked some of that passage. I did not use it on this because at the time that divider actually made contact with that. And it wasn't until I got to that manifold that I realized it. So when I tested the RPM, I used this spacer, just a 1 inch open. So what's going to happen with the AFR is I'm going to re-dyno it, but instead I'm just going to use a 1 inch open spacer. That's all. And we'll see if that makes any difference at all. I don't know. This one's kind of curious. I'm thinking that this will make more top end and have very little effect, if anything, on the low end. I know something like you'll kill low end torque. I'm thinking it probably won't. I don't think this thing's going to switch it too much of anything. So I wouldn't be surprised if this makes a 5 horsepower difference either way in anything. As far as this goes, I really am uncertain. I have no opinions or thoughts on the matter. But anyway, that's those two. Let's get to 2 more. Here's the next manifolds that we tested, with the exception of that one on the end, and I'll tell you why. On the first dyno session, I tested this one. This is a Holley strip dominator, but the part number is 300-110. Many people said, why didn't you do the strip dominator, which are what these two are? And you're going to see that they're slightly different. So this is not getting tested. I just want to bring it up here to show you the difference. So you can see how much taller it is and things like that. I haven't measured any in the manifold you've seen so far in the video, but I will before they get dyno tested. That information will be in the second book too. But here's why I had these. 2 different people who watch my channel, so viewers, thank you, sent these in for me to test, because I really wanted to test this manifold and another one that I'm getting ready to show you in just a minute. But it's this one, this Holley strip dominator, because I do remember when I was younger that these were the ticket, but after all, we had the first version of the Super Victor, and I think this one is, of course, better. But anyway, wanted to test it. So 2 different customers or viewers sent them in. This is where things get a little tricky, and this is I'm going to teach you something real quick. It turns out Holley made several different foundries have made this manifold. So if you go really far back in time, you'll see one with looks like a snowflake on it. It's a Winner's one. Holley switched foundries and used different ones throughout time. These 2 were cast at different times and different changes. This one's older and this one's newer, and it makes a big difference because chances are I won't get to use both. And you're like, why would you use both? One of the things I wanted to see was, can you have 2 manifolds with the same part number and have a different dyno number? Obviously they do, because they're cast, they should be close to the same, but I wanted to see how much difference really is there from manifold to manifold on the same part number. But I don't think I'm going to get to do that, and I'm going to show you why. This one is what you would get now. What you need to do is pay attention to this rail right here. See this? Okay. This is more the modern one. When Holley first switched to the foundry that they used for this, and I believe this was in China, they started doing things really wrong. And this one's almost unusable. And let me show you why. They did that. See the difference? Notice here, now notice here. What they did is they milled off a good chunk right here at the valve cover rail that never needed to be milled off. So you're like, so big deal. It's not a big deal. You got enough room here for it to seal. But the other thing is, on every one I've seen like this, because I had a bunch that I had to send back because they were wrong, they milled too much off this face. And what that caused that to do is the intake sat lower on the head. So you can think the intake port on the head would be like right here. So when they milled it off, it raised it up. What I'm trying to say is when you would bolt this intake onto a head, you could actually physically look down the plenum just like this, and what you would see is you would see the port, but if you looked on the outside, you could still see the port, which I know I totally confused it. What I'm trying to say is when you bolted it on, the intake port would be great if it was like the same distance right here, right? So it'd be awesome if the head port was here. But the problem is the head port would be here, up here. That's where the air hints. So in other words, when they bolt it on, there's a huge vacuum leak. Because they milled this off, there's nothing to seal. So that because the head port itself was higher than what that is. Now not doing that and not milling as much off this intake face, it seals. So they fixed that problem because there were several that I would have to port, and I'd put it on my mock-up block, put the intake on, and I would see the blue stripe from the gasket, not just a little part of it like I showed you with the Performer RPM. I mean a huge, like the entire blue stripe and part of black underneath it was here, which means I'm seeing the port, the intake port. There's nothing to seal. So it was a problem. Several of them got set back, and you can kind of see on this one anyway. You could feel that. That's not a good machine deal. So for several years, those were just garbage. So this will for sure get tested. So the Holly 300-25 is the part number. This one will for sure get tested. This one probably won't, because most likely, especially since the ports are so tall, this ain't gonna work. So I feel bad for that guy. It's a brand new manifold, and he had no idea until I called him up and was like, you have that version that doesn't seal. So can you fix it? Yes, you can just weld a bead across here, then reface this down. But it's a brand new manifold. Anyway, let's go on the next ones. Here are the next two manifolds. Now, both of these are Hurricanes. This is Hurricane, the version 1. This is version 3. Version 2 is still in the motor and sealed up. If you watched the previous dyno thing, you know what I'm talking about. This one actually finished second, and not by much. I mean, it was really close to finishing first. So I did some modification to it, and you can kind of see what I did. I haven't measured any of it yet. I will have that, and it will be in the book, and I will reveal that stuff. So I'm not trying to hide it. I just don't have it currently. Here's what I did. So I have to, this is a crappy drawing, so bear with me. But what you need to focus on is what I drew is these dividers, okay? Just focus on those dividers. It looks like I did other stuff here, but really, when I did the dividers, I kind of just went across the top here so it kind of blend in. So it looks like I made things larger. I really didn't. I'll show you what I did. I really only made these inside runners larger. I'll get a better picture here. These got larger. These stayed exactly the same. And let me show you with my picture. So usually on a divider, we want it something like this, where it's rounded and you get the idea. And I know the picture of what it looks like. That's not my intention. This is what this Hurricane looks like. It had a big old, right here at the very end, it had a big old blob, and it's around both sides like that. What I did is just on the inside, I made it straight. So in other words, I removed that part, leaving this part, because that part is the outer runner. So smooth on the inside, still has a lump on the outside. That's all I did for this one. And only on the inside. So we'll be very interested to see what it does. Just want to try it. It's not at all fully ported. Now for this one, I used epoxy. So let me move this so I can show you better. Here's what I did. I created a turtle out of epoxy. So now you can get a better view, and it doesn't look any better the more you look at it, I promise. This was kind of like me in a rush, but you get the idea of what I've done. Hopefully, let me kind of shine it a little bit better here. Let me do from that side. See how it's not the prettiest. I was actually in a very big hurry, still have been. That could have been better for sure. It's not horrible, it's just not great. It looks worse because of the shadows, but you can kind of see there's some that, I mean, definitely better on some than others. Now, the reason why you see those spots, which hopefully you can see, that's because this epoxy was old. So I think it'll be fine. Like you see these spots here, in case you're wondering, that's because it's old. The epoxy was old. If it was new, it wouldn't have done it. It would be solid black. So you see it throughout. But anyway, essentially here's what happened. I used this. They don't make the stuff I used to use. It was just quick steel. So instead I use this JB weld. And I know you're like, why don't you just use splash zone? I agree. Splash zone is probably better. But I will say this stuff is so much easier to form. And it does bond well if you take more time. So I don't think this is coming out just because they're such big blobs. And even if it does, this is only going to be on the engine maybe 4 or 5 minutes, something like that. So I'm not too worried. Have I done this before in the past? Yes, in the Engine Masters, and I'm going to tag a video on this so you can see what I did to the Engine Master one with the same manifold. Well, not this manifold, the version 1 of the Hurricane. I did a lot with epoxy and it never came out. The key is you have to prepare well. Now, the other thing is to realize epoxy will come out though in years. So it's going to happen, and it can't be used with methanol. Anyway, this is only pump gas, no big deal. Anyway, so here's what happened. Just raise up the roof. Instead, you can kind of tell on these, and all manifolds, almost all manifolds are this way. They will come up and then they make a flat bottom. So essentially, instead of having it just stay flat, I had the runners come straight. Just like that. Instead of having it, the air coming down off the carb pad into a flat spot, it comes straight in. So that's the idea. However, it does decrease your opening area. So that's maybe a disadvantage. We're gonna see what happens. So this is a man-made turtle. Brodix used to sell aluminum ones you could put in your manifolds themselves, but I wanted to create my own. So this will be an interesting test. In case you remember, this is the one we tried the tubes on. It didn't do much. I might try it again because I have to say the velocity in the port will increase doing this. There's no way it wouldn't. The port itself got smaller. So anyway, there's that. By the way, back to this. This is the quick steel. I just stuck it on here, and it, as you could tell, it's very hard to get off. And this is one little piece. It's pretty hard to break too. So, and that was just one corner. It does not come off. They used to, when I used quick steel, if it ever did come off, it was hard but brittle. So when it came off, it ever went through the motor, went right out, and I never saw it. For instance, Cecil's motor, he had some of this epoxy came off, not this, but the quick steel, which looks identical. I bet you JB Weld just bought it. It had some that came off, and you couldn't even tell. It never did anything. So, but I mean, very, very small. Of course, I prepped it way better, and it was on for far longer. So anyway, there's that. Let's get to a couple more. Here's the manifold that I did for the 2008 Engine Masters Challenge. If you look at all the black stuff, that's the same type of epoxy that I used for this Hurricane that we're getting ready to dyno test on Thursday. I have never shown anybody the pictures of this manifold. This manifold right here, I spent the most amount of time on than any other manifold I've ever done. I think I used to spend like 2 hours a night for almost 3 straight months just messing with modeling clay and on and off the flow bench, trying different things to get the best out of it. I have to say the engine did very well with it. As far as peak power, not so much, but this was for the Engine Master, so you're worried about torque. When it would roll in with torque at 2,500, it was outstanding. It had a dip, and then it just held and never really came off. It was pretty outstanding, especially for what it was in that day. I mean, it made on the same Dunsworth dyno, which is the same one we're using for the dyno mule. This 406 made 584 and like 536 torque, and that was with 10.5 to 1 compression ratio, flat tap at camshaft. So pretty good for what it was. But anyway, this is what it looks like when all the epoxy in there. This is what I wanted this one to look like, but of course, this one took way more time to do than the one that's going to be used on the mule. Here we have 2 of the Super Victors. Both of these were used in round 1 of the dyno sessions, and both were completely stock then. They are not now. So what's changed? Well, on the Super Victor 2, this one is dramatically bigger. So the reason why is because this is made for a customer if go on a 421, even though the dyno mule is only a 400. So this thing's much, much larger. He's going to turn way more RPM than what the dyno mule was. But it's a good test. It's fully ported now. Now, this one ran the carb, so it actually has the burr finish on the bottom. And the rest is all, it's 60 grit, except for the top. I make it cross buff, so it's kind of nicer there. Anyway, that's this. It's big. So prediction on this one will be interesting because I don't know that this is going to make any more power on the dyno for this motor because the manifold itself was pretty good to begin with. I think it finished 4th or 5th. But the heads that it's going on, they only move 270 CFM. And this is not going to be the restriction. And matter of fact, it's so much larger, I don't think it's going to do anything. It might actually even lose torque. It'd be very interesting to see. It'd be cool to see it gain everywhere. But I think because it's not a restriction, this intake wasn't. Doing this probably is going to make no difference. But on a different engine, the one that when we switch to better heads for the dyno mule that flow way more air, that the story is going to change. So I would like to think it's going to pick up some, and it probably will, like a few, but I don't think it's going to be like night and day. But interesting test nonetheless. Big manifold on an engine that really needs something smaller. This was also tested. This is the Super Victor. This is a 2925. All I did on this, it looks like, man, you ported it. No, I mean, some people call this port job. I just call it a burr finish. All I did was burr the whole entire ports, everything. That's it. There's nothing that's, I mean, you could tell the difference. It looks shiny. I promise you it's not, it is shiny, but it's not as smooth as what you think. This is rough, totally rough. And all I did was try to take off the minimal amount of material while leaving a burr finish. So This is not porting. This is just changing the surface texture. That's it. So that's the only thing that's going to be changed with this. We're going to see if it does anything because we have the stock numbers. And by the way, on the dyno session number 3, when we go back, I'm going to make it look like that. And no size change or nothing else. And see if having a 60 grit makes a difference versus the burr. And I don't know. I don't know how this is going to turn out, to be honest with you. My gut says this will make very little difference both ways. Like, it's probably going to maybe gain a little, but it's because you also remove material doing that. So then when I 60 grit, it's probably going to gain a little for the same reason. So point being is, I don't think this is, like, people could spend a lot of time doing this, and I don't know that it gains you a whole lot. But the dyno could make me a liar, and I'd be fine with that. So, but anyway, that's 2. We've got one more left to show you. This is the Motown 4150 intake manifold. Now, this is the same manifold as the BMP one. I'm going to tell you why for this reason. If you look at the front of this, this says World Castings. World Castings was owned by Bill Mitchell. Bill Mitchell actually sold World Castings to PBM. That's why you can get a World Block from PBM. Since he sold that, he still owned all the aluminum rights. So he had to change the name of this manifold. So now if you get it, which you cannot get a Motown, even though it's the exact same manifold. It will just say BMP, Bill Mitchell Products. So it's the exact same manifold. So if you find a BMP manifold, it's the exact same one. It's just he had to change his name because he sold the rights. That's it. Now, they had 2 versions, by the way. They have another one that has a bigger spacer up here. This one by far is the one most people buy, and I've used a lot. If you notice, it's got a dog bone down in the center. And notice you're also thinking, well, you modified it. Look, I'm seeing port marks. That's actually how they come sometimes. So this was cast by BB, stands for Buddy Bar. Sometimes there's casting blobs, so they themselves will see it and they'll just grind away just to get rid of it so it doesn't look so horrible. It's not been ported. This is exactly stock. So completely stock. I'm gonna dyno test this one, and that one will be a very, very neat, because then I've tested just about every 4150 manifold that's here, and I will do all the measurements and stuff, and that should be in a later one too. I have ported several of these, and I did great on Circle Track, so we'll get to find out. Now, we're going to try to dyno test as many of these with the 2-barrel carburetor besides just the 4-barrel to kind of see, because this one gets used a lot for that too, and Circle Track stuff. Now, you might be saying, well, I thought you were going to do something with the trick flow. So let me pull this one real quick just to show you. I don't think this is going to get done in time. I'm sorry about this one. This is the trick flow R. This was used for the first dyno session. I can't get it done. I don't have time. What I was going to do was I made extensions. These are aluminum. I was going to weld it in here, and we'd have extensions so we could see if runner length made that much of a difference. The problem is I don't have time. I've gotten 1/2 done and 3 to go, and there's not enough time. So this might get saved for the 3rd dyno session. But anyway, a little bit longer video, but I thought I'd show you all the stuff. It's gonna be some interesting testing, and I'll get to share it all with you, and I'm not gonna hold anything back. So Thursday's the day. Find out. You guys probably won't get the results. I don't know where I'm gonna post them. Last time I posted results on Speed Talk, which I thought that was worthless. No offense to Speed Talk people, but I think I'll post it probably on Instagram or something. Anyway, I don't know. You get to see the results quickly that way, but I'm only gonna be like, this is the one that made the most. It's pretty generic stuff. It's like, this manifold is the best, number 1, it made this much power, or I think I usually just said, this one's the best, and this is how much power it made, but you won't get to see the curves, so it's kind of deceiving. That stuff comes in later videos that you could see on my channel. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching. It's a little bit longer video, but there's a lot of manifolds obviously do. And remember, if you've got a Victor Jr. or a Team G, if you send them in, and I have them by Wednesday, I will test them. They have to be stock. Do not send me a imported one. I will not do it. So anyway, guys, remember, I'm no Superman. You guys take care.